Hello, and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. My name is John Viglotti, and on behalf of OTC Markets, we're very pleased you joined us for our next live presentation from Idaho Copper Corp. Please note you can submit questions for the presenter in the box to the left of the slides. You can also view a company's availability for one-on-one meetings through the Schedule Meetings tab found in the conference platform. At this point, I'm very pleased to welcome Andrew Brodkey. He's the Chief Operating Officer and Director of Idaho Copper Corp, which trades on the OTC markets under the symbol COPR. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you, John, and thank everybody for sticking around to hear about Idaho Copper today. As was stated by John, my name is Andrew Brodkey. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the company, Idaho Copper Corporation. We own the Kumo project, which is in Idaho. It's very likely that if you're not living in or familiar with Idaho, you probably haven't heard of this project, but it is a major copper, molybdenum, silver deposit, and I'm really happy to be able to talk with you about it today. If we were on an elevator and I was talking to you and sitting with you, and as we rode up and I gave you a 5-second pitch on our project, it would sound something like this. This is a project, it's the right project with the right metals in the right location at the right time. And I think that succinctly tells what I'm going to foreshadows what I'm going to show you today as we move through the slide presentation. So there may be some forward-looking discussion, although I'm going to try to avoid that, but the lawyers have asked me to put this disclaimer in, as you probably see with most of the presentations that are virtual these days. There's a couple slides on this, and now I think let's get into the meat of what our company is about. We're an advanced exploration company that wants to go into development. The copper, molybdenum, silver project that I mentioned is called the Kumo project. It's in Idaho. We have 120 some unpatented mining claims, about 6 patented claims. The total area of the project is roughly 2,640 acres. And we're in the Boise National Forest. We're about 35 miles north as the crow flies from the city of Boise. We have developed the project. I inherited the project, joined the company 2 years ago, but it's advanced in the sense that we have a lot of drilling, a lot of metallurgical, a lot of historical information available, and various iterations of preliminary economic assessments, PEAs. And we're at the final stage of an updated PEA that we hope to be able to publish in mid-2024. And I'll get to that later on in the presentation. The latest PEA that was released to the public was authored by SRK. That was in 2020. And in that particular document, our base case at an 8% discount rate showed the project to be a $356 million net present value. I'm not going to go into the looming copper deficit. I'm sure that many of you who are familiar with the mining industry understand what's going on. There is a big difference projected to be between the copper supply and the demand. That gap going to be existing from probably 2025 onward to the end of this decade for a lot of reasons. I'm going to skip that and really, I think, focus on the meat of what our project is about. Let me move on to the next slide. So I mentioned we're in Idaho, and Idaho, we're actually in south or southwest central Idaho in a historic mining district. And Idaho, for those of you who aren't familiar with the state, is very mining friendly. We have good access, and the project really does feature some of the very key elements you'd want to see in a mining situation. We've got great road access, we've got water, we're very close to power, and we're close to Boise, like I said, 35 miles north. To get to the project from the city, it's about an hour drive, a little bit more than that, depending upon where you leave from the city of Boise, over really good roads and good access till you get to the U.S. Forest Service roads. And I'll show you a slide on that a little bit later. Idaho ranked very highly by the Fraser Institute. I think we got about an 85 or an 86 rating from them. And the Mining Journal World Risk Report that just came out last week gave us in every category above 85. So it's a very strong mining friendly state, which is pretty much what you would expect in the western part of the United States. Little history on the project itself. We're in a historic gold district. This district was explored and developed in the late 1800s and the early 1900s for gold. They made took out a little bit less than 3 million ounces from the area, but copper and molybdenum really weren't looked at until the 1960s when Amex did some exploration work here and started to do some drilling. And they put in roughly 35,000 feet of core and a little bit of RC work prior to, this would be in the 60s and 70s into the 80s. The lode claims went through some different ownerships and were ultimately relocated by a predecessor to us in about the 1993 timeframe. And the company at that time that did the work was called Mosquito Consolidated Gold Mining Company. That company then went through some changes, and we, meaning Idaho Copper Company, was formed as a subsidiary in about the year 2004. And we were a wholly owned subsidiary of Mosquito. And fast forward to today, we were held as a subsidiary of the successors to Mosquito, which today that company is called Multi Metal Development Company. It's a Toronto Stock Venture Exchange company, and we were their wholly owned subsidiary until January of 2023, January of this year, when we were spun out and we performed a reverse takeover of a shell that was traded on the OTC. So now we're we're still owned in a reasonable portion by our former parent company, but we're an independent company trading on the OTC, again, under the symbol COPR. The last drilling that was done was in about the 2012 timeframe. There's about 80,000 feet of core that's been developed. All that core is stored today and available for analysis, and that's something that we're doing, and I'll talk about that later when we get into the technical work that we're currently dealing with on the project. And right now, we're also in permitting. We're largely on, as I mentioned earlier, unpatented land inside the Boise National Forest. So the lead agency there is obviously the U.S. Forest Service. The U.S. Forest Service gave us drilling permits to move forward. I mentioned through 2012. In 2015, we wanted to do some additional drilling, and we ended up going through a couple iterations of court decisions that made us go back and forth. And today, and I'll give you some more detail on this later in the presentation, we're ready to go, and the Forest Service, that is ready to publish sometime next year the final approved plan of operations, and then we'll see how that all pans out. I mentioned that the shareholders of the company merged us with a OTC shell, so I can go on to the next slide. Here's just a brief outline. The little gray box here is the project itself. Access comes from Boise, which is to the south, and there's some smaller communities. The community of Idaho City is over on this part. You don't see it on the map. The Garden Valley community is here. Horseshoe Bend, which is north of Boise, is here. So you can see the road access that leads into the project. And the next slide you'll see, and this is from the current work that's being done with the Forest Service, but these are some proposed drill roads that would allow us to come in after our plan of operations is approved and we get access to complete the drilling that we have planned to take the project to the next level. So let's talk a little bit about, for the geologists in the crowd, a little bit about the project itself. We're in the southwest corner of the Idaho batholith that goes all the way through, it's called the Idaho-Montana Porphyry Belt, goes all the way to Butte. The host rock is granodiorite. Mineralization occurs in quartz monzonite. There have been various mineralizing events over the years. Our chief geologist tells us that the project or the deposit itself is like a mushroom that's been turned on its side. and it is zoned, and I'll talk about that in a second. But we're talking also about principally sulfide mineralization, molybdenum disulfide, and the copper mineralization is chalcopyrite. As I mentioned, it is zoned. We have at the top of the zone, we have a copper silver zone transitioning to a copper molybdenum zone, and the core of the deposit is a pure molybdenum zone. And even though it's probably classified as a porphyry, it's not a classical porphyry. It's not a garden variety type porphyry where you expect to see somewhat reasonably consistent dissemination. Here, it's a stockwork system. The veins that run through the deposit carry most of the minerals, and the veins are scattered, but consistent in the sense that they contain probably up to 90% of the mineralization. And you can see when you look at the core that we have that the mineralization itself is, and the veins are very distinct in color from the host rock and easily visually sorted. This is going to give us a very distinct advantage in ultimately developing the deposit, and I'll explain this a little bit later on. But what this system, the stockwork system, ideally lends itself to is ore sorting, which again I'll explain as we move through the presentation. This is just something you can find on our website. This reflects visual ore sorting. As I mentioned, most of the mineralization is contained in dark veins. It's not easy to see on this particular slide, but if you go to our website, I think you can see it a little bit more clearly. We believe that just based on visual sorting, that up to or more than about 80% of the waste can be separated from the actual veins that carry the metals in the deposit itself. So our assessment of this project very clearly is that sorting, whether it's visual or ultimately we're going to get into mechanical sorting, gives us the potential to really increase the head grade of any ore that ultimately makes its way to the concentrator. The reason why I mentioned earlier that this project is massive is the following. We've got roughly, depending upon what cutoff grade you use, but if you use the lowest cutoff grade that's been reported, as far as resources go, measured and indicated, we've got almost 4 billion pounds of copper, 1.6 billion pounds of molybdenum, and about 180 million ounces of silver, making it really one of the largest undeveloped copper projects in the US and in the Americas. In terms of molybdenum, we believe it's the largest undeveloped molybdenum project in terms of contained metal in the world. Now, one of the lowest cost primary molybdenum and or copper producers, depending on how you look at it as well, that comes out from our PEA, the 2020 PEA that was authored by SRK. And they projected that our yearly production would be on the order of about 43 million pounds of molybdenum, 84 million pounds of copper, and about 3.5 million ounces of silver. Interestingly, also, we do contain some other critical materials. There's rhenium and tungsten, and those need some further study. But as far as the resources go, we know that they are definitely there and probably producible as well. Quickly taking a look at the inferred resources, you will see that it's almost double if you go to the lowest cutoff grade. If you look at everything in total, then you're looking at about 8 billion pounds. If you add the inferred, you're looking at about 8 billion pounds of copper by itself. But let me go to the next slide, which is more illustrative of what this project really looks like. And this is a comparison of Kumo as it sits with some of the other larger copper projects in the Americas. And the yellow oval is Kumo. You can see that this is copper equivalent based on parameters that were in the 2020 PEA. And we've got pretty close to, I think, about 12 billion pounds of copper equivalent if you look at everything together. And if I might have misstated on some of the earlier slides, I meant billion, not million pounds. Billion pounds of copper, 8 billion, not 8 million. So here we've got copper equivalent, 12 point something billion pounds of copper equivalent. Now, if you look at the grade, you'll see that, yeah, the in situ grade isn't so hot, but what really makes up for this and what we really need to focus on is the head grade of the project, head grade of the ore that's going to the mill. When you apply ore sorting, and again, some of the slides that we're going to get into give you an idea of what this is going to look like, this is what really makes this project hum. And that's why I'm so excited and hot about why this project is important and why we believe that it's a very major project that should find some success here in the U.S. This is a quick summary of what the 2020 PEA resulted in, using the metals prices above and only removing, at that point in time, assuming that we could only remove 28% of the waste. SRK said, build a 150,000 ton a day mill. When I got involved in this, by the way, the CapEx for that is over $3 billion. When I first got involved with this project, I knew that number was probably very difficult to sustain, and we needed to work on getting that number down. And that's really what we're trying to do. Recoveries were pretty good. Although I don't think this, yeah, here we go. The slide does show you're going to get close to 92% molybdenum, copper in the high 70s, silver in the 70s. And again, the number from the SRK work in 2020 was a $356 million NPV. This is just a quick comparison. A lot of, I think, the presenters do the same thing here. Our market cap is only $46 million. Our percentage of our NPV to copper equivalent is like less than 0.04%, whereas you look at some of our peers, they're orders of magnitude trading higher than, and that particular metric, that particular multiple versus what Idaho Copper is trading at. Here's where I think I'd like to make sure everybody understands where the project's at and what we're doing with the project today. Talked about a little bit earlier about the preliminary economic assessment update and technical report. Hopefully that'll be done in mid-2024. That consists of some additional metallurgical work. We are engaged in scanning, very discrete scanning on 1.5 centimeter intervals. The previous work that was done and the block model reflects 50-foot composites based on 10-foot intervals that were assessed and evaluated at the time that the core was actually developed, but we're getting down very, very close to, when I talk about these intervals, we're going to get much, much better information out of the XRF scanning that we're going to be doing. We're also going to be looking at and doing some test work with ore sorting, and this will be bucket level XRF separation. We're depending upon how we want to define the parameters of cutoffs. For those of you that aren't familiar with this type of technology, it is proven. It's in use in many copper projects today around the world, clearly in British Columbia and in Chile. What we were trying to do here, obviously, is to get to our optimal waste removal that I earlier mentioned was dependent on or reflected by the visual ore sorting, where we think that the ideal number or the actual maximum number is going to be about 84% of the waste being removed. But I think we'd be happy if we ultimately settled on a number like 75 to 80%. What that's going to allow you to do is to increase the head grade to the mill by orders of magnitude. If you recall the slide earlier, our in situ grade isn't high, but our head grade is going to be dramatically improved. So SRK's 150,000 ton a day mill, $3 billion initial project CapEx, we believe that we can instead build a mill of a size of about 30,000 tons a day and bring that CapEx. Our target is to bring it to less than $1 billion. So the same amount of material will go through and be produced from a much, much smaller concentrator. This is just a slide that shows how ore sorting works. I'm going to skip over it quickly and talk about other things we're doing. I mentioned that we're on Forest Service land. The last iteration of our plan of operations was sent out for public scoping by the Forest Service in October of this year. They plan to have a draft environmental assessment released in January of next year, public comment period. And if everything goes according to schedule, we're looking at late summer, early fall for our plan of operations approval. Once that's done and once our PEA update is out, we anticipate that sometime next year we'll be starting on a preliminary feasibility study. That'll include the completion of the drilling we talked about. We're going to upgrade the block model and the resource with additional information. We're looking at some additional scanning. The ore sorting XRF bucket level will be complemented by some penetrative scanning, probably some atomic absorption gamma ray type scanning, and we're canvassing the industry for that currently. When we separate out material that's going to the concentrator, we're going to have high grade, medium, and low grade, and maybe even more delineation. But what we want to do is take the low grade ore and look at that, stockpile that, and have some assessment about whether that can be leached with some of the newer technologies that are available in the industry that have just been developed. We're also looking at deploying in-pit conveyors instead of trucks. We're looking at some concentrate transport alternatives like gondolas instead of using trucks. And all this, of course, is consistent with trying to get your carbon footprint down. Like many other companies, we're looking at, particularly with the Department of Defense and Department of Energy, we're looking at financing assistance with some of the critical materials, critical metals programs. But I think that when we get to 2024 and we start the PFS, the preliminary feasibility study, moving into 2025, we'll have a go-no decision sometime in 2025. The other big company action for 2024 is to uplist from the OTC where we're at now to one of the better and major U.S. exchanges, either the NASDAQ or the Amex. Just really briefly, this is all we are today. This is the team. Myself, our CEO, Stephen Radofsky, who is a ex-Glencore. Our CFO is not from the industry, but he's learned pretty quickly. He's in San Francisco. His name is Bob Scannell. And we have a director, John Moeller is an environmental expert and a director, and he's been involved with the project for some time. We do have skin in the game. A lot of shares are out today. You'll see 200 million shares. Management owns about 28% of the shares, but we are definitely invested in the company itself. So with that, that's my presentation. Happy to look at questions, and let me go over to here, Q&A. Okay, so here are some of the questions that have come in. The first question is, would you be able to benefit from the Inflation Reduction Act incentives? Absolutely. Our plan is to there's two routes, but the one we're probably going to take is called the white paper route, where you submit your request for funding directly to the DOE or the Department of Energy, DOD or DOE, and with your supporting documentation. And the idea is that if they like your project, they can finance even at the earlier stage, the preliminary feasibility stage or the BFS stage, and they can, under regulation, finance actually half of the cost of those exercises. Next question was plans to move to the QX or the QB. Yes, that's currently underway. We had to get DTC eligibility first. I believe that's either forthcoming or completed, and we'll probably go there first before next year, as I mentioned, up to a higher exchange, either the Amex or the NASDAQ. Next question says, looks like we're undervalued. What are the catalysts for revaluation? The biggest catalyst is going to be next year when our updated PEA study is published, the technical report and everything along with it. I think you're going to see a valuation that makes the 2020 number that I mentioned, which was $356 million at 8%. I think that's going to be a fraction of what the new valuation should reflect. I can't predict it with certainty, but I just have a strong feeling that with everything that we're looking at, including ore sorting, including better metals prices that were used in the 2020 document, and some other items I think that are going to come into play, you're going to see a valuation much different than what you saw in 2020. Current cash position was the next question. Our treasury today I believe, is on the order of $200,000 or $300,000. We are obviously we're currently engaged in some financings. We have engaged a local U.S. investment bank called Newbridge Securities, which is doing some work for us. They're raising money principally from their contacts in the retail world. They have a very strong retail platform, and we just started with them. The idea is that in terms of the financing that we're after, we're going to be raising enough money to obviously pay for the work that's being done currently, all the technical work that I identified, which includes the scanning, the ore sorting, and the updated PEA document itself. That's roughly $1 million. So we want to get money in to pay for that. That goes into the middle of 2024. And there is some burn with the company. I don't know the exact numbers. I'm going to guess we're burning about $50,000 a month, something along those lines. I don't see any other questions. If anybody has anything, please feel free to add any questions. I would love to be able to talk to any of the folks that are present today in person. If you have any interest in our company, please look at the ability to hook up with us directly. And that has been made available through the OTC markets who are hosting these investor conferences. Please go to our website and take a look at what we're doing. Follow the company. This is one, in my judgment, one of the best untold stories that people just don't, I think, have a lot of information on, and largely because we've been really dormant from about 2015 through this year. But now that we are active, and now that we are in the market, now that we are moving this big project forward, I think that you're going to see some news flow. You're going to see some good results published, and particularly in the middle of 2024, when our updated PEA comes out, you're going to see a valuation that I think is going to be kicking, and something that we're really striving for. And I believe it'll engender an incredible amount of additional interest in the company. So I don't even have anything more. I'll turn it back over to the OTC guys. I don't see any more questions. Thanks everybody for joining. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk about our project, and